In a quiet corner of an elite private school, surrounded by manicured lawns and gleaming buildings, there lived a man named Walter. He was the school's custodian, a role that often went unnoticed, but was vital to keeping the campus running smoothly. Every morning before sunrise, Walter arrived with his mop, broom, and toolbox, ready to tackle whatever mess awaited him. His work wasn't glamorous, but he took pride in it. To Walter, the school felt like a second home, and he treated it as such. The students at this school came from wealthy families. Many drove luxury cars to campus, wore designer clothes, and carried the latest gadgets. Most of them barely noticed Walter as they passed him in the halls. If they did, they might give a quick nod or mumble a thank you if he held open a door for them. But for the most part, Walter blended into the background, just another fixture of the school, like the lockers or the benches outside. Despite being overlooked, Walter had a sharp eye for detail. He noticed things others didn't, like how some students left trash on the cafeteria tables instead of using the bins, or how locker rooms were often left in disarray after sports practices. And then there was the pool, an Olympic-sized marvel that sparkled under the sun during swim meets but turned into a disaster zone on weekends. It started small. At first, Walter would find empty soda cans floating in the water or candy wrappers stuck in the filters. But over time, the problem escalated. Groups of students began sneaking onto campus late at night, turning the pool area into their personal party venue. They brought loud music, snacks, and sometimes even alcohol. By Monday morning, the once pristine pool deck looked like a battlefield. Broken glass littered the tiles, chairs were overturned, and soggy debris floated in the water. Walter tried to ignore it at first. After all, it wasn't his job to discipline the students. That was up to the teachers and administrators. But no matter how many times the school threatened punishment or tightened security, the parties kept happening. The culprits always seemed to slip through the cracks, leaving behind only destruction and zero accountability. What bothered Walter most wasn't just the mess itself, it was the attitude behind it. These students acted like they owned the place, treating the school's facilities as disposable toys. They showed no respect for the hard work that went into maintaining the campus. Walter spent hours scrubbing graffiti off walls, fishing out ruined textbooks from the pool, and fixing equipment damaged during these wild nights. Each cleanup felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that his efforts meant nothing to them. One particular incident stood out. A group of seniors decided to throw a glow-in-the-dark party, pouring fluorescent paint into the pool for effect. When Walter arrived the next morning, the entire filtration system was clogged, and the water had turned murky green. Cleaning it required days of backbreaking labor and thousands of dollars in repairs. Yet when confronted, the students shrugged it off, claiming it was just a joke. That moment planted a seed of frustration deep within Walter. For years, he'd silently endured their antics, cleaning up after them without complaint. But now, something inside him snapped. He realized that waiting for someone else to fix the problem wasn't going to work. If anyone was going to put an end to these reckless parties, it would have to be him. And so, Walter began thinking about what he could do, not just to clean up the messes, but to make sure they stopped happening altogether. Walter's plan was simple in theory, but intricate in execution. He knew the students thrived on spectacle. They craved flashy, over-the-top experiences they could brag about on social media. So he decided to give them exactly what they wanted. A party set up so irresistible that they wouldn't be able to resist. But beneath the glitz and glamour, Walter embedded a series of clever traps designed to expose their reckless behavior and teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The first step was transforming the pool area into something extraordinary. Walter envisioned an Instagram-worthy paradise, complete with neon lights, inflatable decorations, and upbeat music. He scoured local stores for supplies, picking out colorful string lights that would cast dazzling reflections on the water. Giant inflatable flamingos and palm trees added a tropical touch, making the space look like a luxurious resort. The goal was to create an atmosphere so inviting that the students wouldn't suspect anything unusual until it was too late. But the real magic lay in the hidden details. Walter enlisted Jake, the tech-savvy groundskeeper, to help rig the area with harmless yet surprising pranks. Beneath the surface of the pool, Jake installed waterproof drones programmed to release dye packets at random intervals. These packets contained food-safe coloring that would turn the water bright shades of pink, green, or blue without causing any harm. While the colors were eye-catching and fun at first glance, they also served another purpose: staining swimsuits and skin, leaving behind evidence of the students' mischief long after the party ended. Another key element of the plan involved sound. Walter had spent weeks collecting audio recordings from forgotten phones and devices left behind after previous parties. Mrs. Thompson, the school librarian, had secretly saved these recordings, which included snippets of embarrassing confessions, arguments, and even jokes about trashing the school property. With Jake's help, Walter synced these clips to play through underwater speakers whenever someone jumped into the pool. Imagine the shock of hearing your own voice, or your friends, blaring out secrets you thought were private. To ensure nothing was missed, Walter strategically placed hidden cameras throughout the pool area. Disguised as ordinary objects like potted plants or light fixtures, these cameras captured every angle of the scene. Their footage would serve two purposes: providing undeniable proof of the students' destructive behavior and documenting their reactions when the pranks unfolded. Walter didn't intend to use the recordings maliciously. He simply wanted leverage to present to the administration if his plan succeeded. As the pieces fell into place, Walter couldn't help but feel a mix-in of excitement and nerves. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about accountability. He hoped the students would realize the consequences of their actions, not just for the school but for themselves. By turning their beloved pool into a trap, Walter aimed to show them that their privilege didn't exempt them from responsibility. On Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Walter and his team put the finishing touches on the setup. The neon lights flickered to life, casting vibrant hues across the water. Music played softly in the background, creating an ambience that screamed party. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. Walter took a step back, surveying the scene with a satisfied smile. He knew the students wouldn't be able to resist. They'd see the glowing pool and think it was their lucky night, completely unaware of the surprises waiting for them. Despite the effort he poured into the plan, Walter felt no malice toward the students. His intention wasn't to humiliate them, but to make them reflect on their choices. He believed everyone deserved a second chance, but sometimes a little nudge was necessary to spark change. As he locked up the pool house and headed home, Walter allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow night, the students would get more than they bargained for, and maybe, just maybe, they'd learn a lesson worth remembering. Late Friday evening, after the school campus had fallen silent and dark, Walter and his small team sprang into action. Armed with supplies, gadgets, and a shared determination, they transformed the pool area into a dazzling spectacle that no student could possibly ignore. The air buzzed with excitement as they worked tirelessly under the cover of night, knowing their efforts would set the stage for an unforgettable showdown. Walter started by stringing up neon lights around the perimeter of the pool deck. Bright pinks, electric blues, and glowing greens illuminated the space, casting shimmering reflections on the water's surface. The effect was mesmerizing, a kaleidoscope of colors that made the pool look like something out of a dream. Jake helped secure inflatable decorations. Giant flamingos floated lazily near the shallow end, while palm trees swayed gently in the breeze created by portable fans. Even the diving board got a makeover, wrapped in twinkling fairy lights that gave it a magical touch. But the real work happened beneath the surface. Jake carefully lowered waterproof drones into the pool, positioning them strategically so they wouldn't be noticed right away. Each drone carried small packets of harmless dye, programmed to release at random intervals throughout the night. Walter tested the system multiple times, ensuring the mechanism worked flawlessly. When activated, the dyes would swirl through the water, turning it into a swirling rainbow. It was playful enough to catch the students off guard, but bold enough to leave a lasting impression. Literally, Walter chuckled to himself, imagining how those designer swimsuits would look afterward. The sound setup was equally impressive. Hidden underwater speakers were connected to a playlist curated by Walter himself. At first, the music would play softly, luring the students deeper into the illusion of a perfect party. But when someone jumped into the pool, the system would trigger pre-recorded audio clips from past parties. These snippets included embarrassing confessions, careless boasts about trashing the school, and even arguments over whose idea it was to throw books into the pool. Hearing their own voices, or their friends, blaring unexpectedly was sure to send shockwaves through the group. To capture every moment, Walter installed discreet cameras disguised as everyday objects, a fake potted plant here, a decorative lantern there, each one housing a tiny lens that recorded crystal-clear footage. He positioned them strategically to document not just the chaos, but also the students' reactions. Would they laugh, panic, try to cover up their tracks? Walter didn't know what to expect, but he was certain the recordings would provide undeniable proof of their antics. As the final touches came together, the team stood back to admire their handiwork. The pool area looked like a scene straight out of a high-end social media post, irresistible to anyone seeking attention or validation online. Walter ran through a mental checklist, double-checking every detail to ensure nothing had been overlooked. Satisfied with the result, he turned off the main lights, leaving only the neon glow to illuminate the space. Then he locked up the pool house and headed home, his heart pounding with anticipation. Despite the late hour, Walter couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts of what might happen the next night. Would the students take the bait? How would they react when the pranks unfolded? Part of him worried about whether the plan would work, but another part felt confident. He knew these kids thrived on appearances. They wouldn't pass up an opportunity to show off such a glamorous setup. And once they stepped foot in the pool area, Walter's trap would spring into action. By sunrise, the transformation was complete. The pool gleamed under the soft morning light, its vibrant decorations waiting patiently for their audience. Walter allowed himself a rare smile as he pictured the expressions on the students' faces when they arrived. They'd think they'd stumbled upon the ultimate party spot, unaware that they were walking into a carefully orchestrated lesson. For Walter, this wasn't just about teaching them accountability. It was about reclaiming respect for the school and everyone who worked hard to keep it running smoothly. As he sipped his coffee, watching the sun rise over the quiet campus, Walter felt ready. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for sure. The students would never forget this night. The trap was set, and by Saturday night, word had spread like wildfire among the students. Rumors buzzed through group chats and social media about the mysterious transformation of the school pool. Pictures leaked online, snapped by curious students who had sneaked a peek earlier that day, showing neon lights, inflatable decorations, and an overall vibe that screamed exclusive party. The intrigue was irresistible. By midnight, a large group of students had gathered at the pool gates, eager to see what awaited them. As they pushed open the gate, their faces lit up with excitement. The scene before them looked like something out of a music video. Neon lights pulsed in rhythm with the soft beat of the music playing in the background. Giant flamingos floated lazily in the water, while palm trees swayed gently as if welcoming them to a tropical paradise. Without hesitation, the students dove right in, snapping selfies and cheering each other on. Laughter filled the air as they cannonballed into the glowing water, completely unaware of the surprises lurking beneath the surface. At first, everything seemed perfect. The water shimmered under the colorful lights, creating an almost magical atmosphere. But then, the first prank activated. A drone released a burst of bright blue dye, sending ripples of color spreading through the pool. At first, the students thought it was part of the fun. "Whoa, check this out," one shouted, holding up their phone to capture the moment. Others laughed and splashed around, trying to chase the swirling colors. Their designer swimsuits began absorbing the dye, leaving behind splotches of blue that wouldn't wash out easily. But the real chaos began moments later. As one student leaped off the diving board, the underwater speakers sprang to life, blasting a familiar voice. "Hey, isn't this where we threw those biology books last month?" The music cut off abruptly, replaced by snippets of embarrassing confessions from past parties. Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, and remember when you said you didn't care if you got expelled?" Gasps erupted from the crowd as they realized whose secrets were being aired. Some laughed nervously, pretending it was all a joke, while others scrambled to identify the source of the recordings. The reactions were priceless. One girl frantically tried to climb out of the pool, her face flushed with embarrassment as she recognized her own voice mocking the custodial staff. A boy standing near the edge froze mid-selfie, his grin fading as he heard himself bragging about vandalizing the locker room. Arguments broke out as friends accused each other of recording private conversations. Meanwhile, more drones continued releasing dye packets, turning the water into a kaleidoscope of colors. Pink turned to green, then purple, until the once clear pool resembled a psychedelic swirl. Panic set in as the students realized they were trapped in a spectacle designed specifically for them. Every jump into the water triggered another round of audio clips, each more damning than the last. Even worse, the hidden cameras captured every reaction, every awkward laugh, every panicked glance, every attempt to escape unnoticed. Some tried to turn off the lights or unplug the speakers, but Walter had made sure everything was tamper-proof. There was no way to stop the show now. By the time the final prank unfolded, a sudden burst of glittery confetti raining down from hidden compartments above, the students were in full retreat mode. They scrambled out of the pool, grabbing towels and shoes, desperate to leave before anything else happened. But the damage was done. Their swimsuits were stained, their secrets exposed, and their egos bruised. As they fled the scene, many couldn't help but wonder who had orchestrated this elaborate setup, and how had they managed to pull it off without anyone noticing. Back at home, Walter watched the clock tick past 2 a.m., knowing the prank had played out exactly as planned. He allowed himself a small smile, imagining the students' stunned expressions as they realized they'd been outsmarted. For years, they had treated the school, and him, with disrespect, leaving destruction in their wake. Tonight, they had gotten a taste of their own medicine. Walter didn't feel guilt or regret. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The students might not understand the lesson yet, but tomorrow, when the truth came to light, they would. The breaking point came on a chilly Monday morning when Walter arrived at the pool house earlier than usual. As he pushed open the heavy glass doors, the sight before him made his stomach churn. The once pristine pool area was in shambles. Garbage was scattered everywhere. Empty chip bags, crumpled napkins, and plastic cups lay strewn across the deck like confetti after a parade. The lounge chairs were knocked over, some with torn fabric hanging loose. Worst of all, someone had spray-painted crude words on the walls near the diving board. But that wasn't the end of it. When Walter stepped closer to inspect the pool itself, his heart sank. The water, usually crystal clear, was murky and clouded. Upon closer inspection, he discovered what looked like glitter glue glistening beneath the surface. Whoever had thrown the party had dumped entire bottles of the sticky substance directly into the filtration system, clogging it completely. Walter sighed heavily as he realized this would take days, maybe even weeks, to fix, and cost the school thousands of dollars in repairs. As he stood there, shaking his head in disbelief, a group of students walked by. They weren't sneaking away guiltily. Instead, they strolled past casually, laughing about how epic Saturday night's party had been. One boy joked about how someone cannonballed into the pool while wearing a tuxedo, while another bragged about capturing videos of their antics on social media. Their carefree attitude only fueled Walter's frustration. These kids didn't seem to understand or care about the consequences of their actions. Walter clenched his fists tightly around the handle of his mop. He felt anger bubbling inside him, but it wasn't just anger, it was helplessness. For years, he cleaned up after these students, quietly picking up the pieces of their reckless behavior. He'd reported the damage to the administration countless times, hoping they'd finally take action. But nothing changed. The parties kept happening, and the destruction grew worse each time. It was as if the rules didn't apply to these privileged teenagers who acted like the world revolved around them. That day, something shifted inside Walter. Enough was enough. He couldn't keep letting them treat the school and his hard work with such disrespect. If no one else was willing to stand up to them, then he would have to do something drastic. This wasn't just about cleaning up anymore. It was about sending a message, a loud, unforgettable message, that their entitled behavior wouldn't be tolerated. Walter spent the rest of the day thinking about what he could do. He knew he couldn't physically stop the students from coming onto campus or change their attitudes overnight. But he also knew they thrived on attention. They loved showing off their wild parties on social media, basking in the admiration of their peers. What if he used that against them? What if he turned their favorite playground, the pool, into something unexpected, something that would expose their antics for everyone to see? By evening, an idea began forming in Walter's mind. It was bold, risky, and slightly mischievous, but it might just work. Walter smiled to himself as he imagined the look on those students' faces when they realized they'd been outsmarted. He didn't want to hurt anyone or cause real harm. He simply wanted to teach them a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. With renewed determination, Walter decided to put his plan into motion. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope, and maybe even excitement, about taking control of the situation. Over the next few days, Walter started gathering supplies and enlisting help from unlikely allies. He approached Mrs. Thompson, the school librarian, who had witnessed her fair share of student mischief over the years. She listened intently as Walter explained his plan, nodding with approval. "It's about time someone taught those kids a lesson," she said firmly, offering to assist however she could. Together, they recruited Jake, the tech-savvy groundskeeper, whose expertise with gadgets proved invaluable. As Walter prepared for his big move, he couldn't help but feel a mix of nerves and anticipation. This wasn't like him. Quiet, reserved Walter stepping out of the shadows to confront the chaos head-on. But deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do. The students needed to learn accountability, and if it took a little creativity to get through to them, so be it. Little did they know, their next party would be unlike anything they'd ever experienced, and not in a good way. As weeks turned into months, the story of the great pool prank began to take on a life of its own. What had started as a quiet act of rebellion by Walter slowly morphed into a legend whispered in classrooms, hallways, and even parent-teacher meetings. The students who had been caught up in that chaotic night never spoke openly about what happened, too embarrassed to admit their secrets had been aired for all to hear, but they couldn't deny the impact it had left on them. At first, many tried to brush it off as a fluke or some strange accident. It was probably just a malfunction, one senior muttered during lunch, avoiding eye contact with his friends. But deep down, they knew better. The perfectly timed eye releases, the eerie recordings of their own voices, the hidden cameras capturing every move. It was too deliberate, too clever to be random. Some speculated it was the work of a rival student pulling an elaborate senior year prank. Others joked that aliens had descended upon the school to teach them a lesson. No one suspected Walter, the unassuming custodian who quietly went about his duties as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. The students' behavior around campus shifted noticeably. Trash cans were no longer overflowing after events. Chairs and tables in common areas remained intact instead of being flipped over or broken. Even the locker rooms, once prone to post-game messes, were tidier than ever before. It wasn't just fear driving this newfound sense of responsibility. It was respect. For the first time, many students realized how much effort went into maintaining the school's pristine appearance. They saw the mops, brooms, and cleaning carts not as invisible tools but as symbols of hard work they'd long taken for granted. Walter noticed these small changes, though he never mentioned them aloud. He appreciated the subtle nods of acknowledgement when students passed him in the halls, a polite thank you here, a sincere good morning there. One day, while emptying trash bins near the cafeteria, a freshman approached him hesitantly. "Ah, Mr. Walter," she began, twisting her hands nervously. "I just wanted to say thanks for keeping everything so nice around here." Her cheeks flushed red as she quickly walked away, leaving Walter with a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Even among faculty members, Walter's reputation grew. Teachers who once overlooked him now greeted him warmly, often stopping to chat about weekend plans or share stories about their families. Mrs. Thompson made it a point to bring him homemade cookies every Thursday, while Jake teased him relentlessly about becoming the school's secret hero. Though Walter humbly downplayed his role in the prank, everyone knew the truth. He had sparked a change that rippled through the entire community. The transformation extended beyond behavior. Students began organizing volunteer cleanup days, taking turns helping Walter tidy up the campus. At first, it seemed like a novelty, an excuse to skip study hall. But soon, it became a tradition. Seeing teenagers willingly pick up trash or scrub graffiti off walls was a sight Walter never thought he'd witness. He often joined them, offering tips on proper cleaning techniques and sharing stories from his decades of experience. These moments created an unexpected bond between Walter and the students, bridging the gap between staff and student body. By the end of the school year, the pool area stood untouched by unauthorized parties. Its waters sparkled under the sun, reflecting the vibrant colors of the surrounding landscape. Walter took pride in knowing that his plan hadn't just stopped the chaos. It had planted seeds of accountability and gratitude. The students weren't perfect, of course. They still whispered jokes and occasionally pushed boundaries. But they carried themselves differently now, with a greater awareness of the impact their actions had on others. One evening, as Walter locked up the pool house after another day's work, he paused to look out over the tranquil scene. The neon lights he used for the prank had been removed, replaced by soft, warm bulbs that bathed the area in a golden glow. It felt symbolic, somehow, the transition from chaos to calm, from disregard to respect. Walter allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He hadn't set out to become a hero or a legend. He'd simply wanted to protect the place he cared about. Yet in doing so, he'd reminded everyone, students, teachers, and even himself, that true strength lies in standing up for what matters, no matter how invisible you might feel. By dawn, the chaos of the night had settled, leaving behind a scene that looked more like a battlefield than a pool party. The once gleaming pool deck was littered with abandoned towels, shoes, and empty cups. The water, now a murky swirl of pink, green, and purple dye, shimmered under the early morning light, still holding traces of glittery confetti that floated lazily on its surface. Walter arrived at the school earlier than usual, carrying his mop and bucket as always. But this time, he wasn't just there to clean up. He was there to collect evidence. He walked around the pool area, taking in the aftermath with a mix of satisfaction and quiet reflection. The students' footprints were everywhere, muddy streaks on the tiles, smudged handprints on the walls where they'd tried to steady themselves while fleeing. Some of their belongings lay scattered across the ground. A forgotten phone here, a designer hat there. Walter picked up each item carefully, setting them aside for safekeeping. These weren't just lost possessions. They were pieces of the puzzle that would help him prove his case. But the real treasure trove was the footage from the hidden cameras. Walter retrieved the devices one by one, downloading the recordings onto a secure drive. As he reviewed the clips, he couldn't help but crack a small smile. The students' reactions were even better than he'd imagined. There was confusion, panic, and outright disbelief as they realized their secrets were being broadcast for everyone to hear. One clip showed a boy frantically trying to mute the speakers, only to slip and fall into the dyed water. Another captured a girl staring wide-eyed at her stained swimsuit, muttering something about how much it had cost. With the evidence in hand, Walter headed straight to the headmaster's office. He knocked politely, waiting until he was invited inside before stepping forward. The headmaster, Mr. Grayson, looked up from his desk, surprised to see Walter standing there so early. "Walter, is everything all right?" he asked, gesturing for him to sit down. Walter placed the drive on the desk and began explaining what had happened. He described the repeated incidents of vandalism, the disregard for rules, and the administration's inability, or unwillingness, to address the problem effectively. Then he revealed his plan: the transformed pool area, the harmless pranks, and the undeniable proof captured on camera. "I didn't do this out of spite," Walter said firmly. "I did it because someone needed to hold them accountable." Mr. Grayson listened intently, his expression shifting from shock to concern as he watched snippets of the footage. It was clear the situation had spiraled far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The videos not only showed the students' reckless behavior, but also highlighted their attitudes, how casually they dismissed the consequences of their actions. Realizing the gravity of the issue, Mr. Grayson promised immediate action. Stricter penalties were implemented for rule breakers, including mandatory community service and parental involvement. Security measures were tightened, with additional cameras installed around the campus to prevent future incidents. Word of Walter's ingenious retaliation spread quietly among the faculty and staff. While the students remained blissfully unaware of who was behind the prank, the adults couldn't help but admire Walter's creativity and determination. Mrs. Thompson, the librarian, often teased him about becoming an undercover detective, while Jake, the groundskeeper, joked that they should start charging admission for the next big reveal. Walter brushed off the compliments, insisting he'd only done what was necessary. Still, things began to change subtly around the school. Students started treating the facilities with more care, perhaps fearing another mysterious intervention. Some even went out of their way to thank Walter when passing him in the halls, though most apologies came awkwardly. "Ugh, thanks for keeping the place clean." I guess they carried a newfound sincerity. For the first time in years, Walter felt seen, not as a background figure, but as someone whose work mattered deeply to the school's success. As weeks passed, the pool area returned to its usual pristine condition, freed from late-night parties or reckless behavior. Walter continued his routine, sweeping floors and polishing surfaces, but with a lighter heart. He knew the lesson wouldn't stick forever. Teenagers were bound to test boundaries, but for now, peace had been restored. And if anyone ever forgot the importance of respect and responsibility, Walter had plenty of backup plans ready to go. After all, sometimes, a little ingenuity was all it took to remind people of what truly mattered. Years passed, and the legend of the Great Pool Prank grew into something more than just a cautionary tale. Alumni returning for reunions often found themselves reminiscing about that unforgettable night, laughing nervously as they recounted how they'd been outsmarted by an unseen force. Some admitted it had been embarrassing at the time, finding their designer swimsuits stained or hearing their private conversations blared over speakers. But looking back, they realized it had taught them valuable lessons about responsibility, respect, and accountability. For many former students, the prank became a defining moment in their high school experience. It wasn't just the shock of being caught red-handed. It was the realization that someone cared enough to call them out on their behavior. "It made me think twice before doing anything reckless," one graduate confessed during a reunion speech. "I didn't know who was behind it then, but now I realize it was probably Walter. He always seemed like the quiet type, but man, he had guts." Walter himself never sought recognition for what he'd done. He continued working at the school for several more years, keeping its halls clean and its facilities pristine. But eventually, age caught up with him, and he decided it was time to retire. On his last day, the entire school gathered to honor him. Not just the faculty and staff, but also dozens of students whose lives he touched without even realizing it. They presented him with a plaque engraved with heartfelt messages and photos from over the years. One student wrote simply, Thank you for teaching us that actions have consequences and for making our school a better place. As a final tribute, the administration announced that the pool facility would be renamed the Walter Hall Aquatic Center. When the new sign was unveiled during a small ceremony, Walter stood silently, visibly moved. He hadn't expected such an honor, let alone the standing ovation that followed. Students clapped enthusiastically, some even chanting his name. For once, Walter wasn't blending into the background. He was front and center, celebrated not just as a custodian, but as a hero. Even after retiring, Walter's influence lingered. The stricter rules and improved security measures ensured that the pool area remained free from unauthorized parties. But beyond the policies, something deeper had shifted within the school culture. New generations of students inherited stories of the prank, learning from both the mistakes of those who came before them and the quiet determination of the man who challenged them to do better. The pool area became a symbol of pride, a reminder that privilege came with responsibility. Occasionally, alumni would visit Walter at his modest home, bringing updates about their lives and thanking him for the lessons he imparted. One former student, now a successful entrepreneur, told Walter how the prank had inspired her to start a community cleanup initiative in her neighborhood. Another, working as a teacher himself, shared how he used Walter's story to encourage his own students to take ownership of their actions. Each visit reminded Walter that his efforts had reached far beyond the confines of the school campus. In his retirement, Walter spent his days tending to his garden, reading books, and reflecting on his legacy. He often thought about the students, the ones who had laughed at him, ignored him, and ultimately respected him. They weren't perfect, and neither was he, but together they had created something meaningful. The school wasn't just a building filled with classrooms and pools. It was a community shaped by the values of hard work, integrity, and mutual respect. On sunny afternoons, Walter would sometimes drive past the school, slowing down to glance at the sparkling pool where it all began. The neon lights were long gone, replaced by warm, inviting fixtures that illuminated the water beautifully. A fresh coat of paint adorned the walls, and the diving board gleamed under the sunlight. It looked peaceful now, almost serene. Walter smiled faintly, knowing that beneath its polished surface lay a story, a testament to the power of standing up for what matters, no matter how invisible you might feel. Though Walter never sought fame or glory, his legacy endured. To future generations of students, the name Walter Hall served as a constant reminder that change could come from anywhere, even from those who worked quietly in the shadows. And while the details of the prank faded over time, the lessons it taught remained etched in the hearts of everyone who walked through the school's doors. In the end, Walter proved that true heroes aren't defined by grand gestures or loud voices. They're defined by the quiet strength to make things right when no one else will.